Tuesday afternoon, but we have a lot of really important things to talk about in the world of education. I'm very proud to serve as the president of the Connecticut Education Association and to have the opportunity to reach out to more than 43,000 educators across this state who are serving the children and their communities incredibly well. In the process of trying to understand where their hearts and their minds are, we do an annual survey, as many of you already know. And this year, we once again reached out, got an excellent representation. Our survey reflects every single county. It represents all the grade levels. We feel confident about the distribution of it that is truly reflective of where our people are at here today. One of the things that I think is really important to know is that our educators are telling us that stress and burnout has actually leapfrogged to the top of the list of concerns. Things like, how do I get this job done in the course of a single day? How do I meet all the needs of the students that I have the privilege to serve? How do I do all of this without the resources that my school needs to serve students who are either having certain challenges either at home or at school? These are all stresses that our teachers carry with them and often try to compensate for. So if you know a teacher, you know somebody who bought school supplies for another person's child. If you know a teacher, you know somebody who paid out of pocket to ensure that their classroom was welcoming and kind to their students. If you know a teacher, you know somebody who bought snacks to make sure students didn't go hungry. These are the little things that are really big in terms of making our schools the place our students need them to be. But that burden can't solely sit on the shoulders of our teachers. So what we need to continue to talk about is what is important to change. We have amazing things happening in our schools despite the underfunding, despite the under-resourced spaces. Imagine what would happen if we did right by the children in Connecticut. Imagine what would happen if we could fully staff our schools because we paid our educators a decent competitive wage. Imagine all that Connecticut could be. Imagine what our economy would look like. Imagine what our workforce would look like if we chose to make the critical investments that allow us to build up the state of Connecticut. I'm here today joined by some really important colleagues and friends. These are people who serve out in our schools as educators, and we have the privilege of also having 3 individuals who not only serve as educators, but as our representatives here in this building behind us, ensuring that the voice of our people is loud and proud in the legislative process. Not an easy task. There's a lot of voices in the building behind us, and making sure that educators are prominent is incredibly challenging. So we're here to elevate not just what we have to say, but the positions that we're going to ask these individuals to take on our behalf in the coming months. And no doubt, as with all legislative sessions, it will be vibrant. I think that's a fair word. It will be interesting, but it will be demanding. And educators like myself and my dear friends behind me are going to ensure that the proper demands are placed on our legislators to get our needs met. Our survey put a fine point, and you all will have access to it, but it put a fine point. The 5 major things that they're really talking about are stress and burnout, the salaries, the concerns around student discipline and behavior and how we're managing and supporting our children, the lack of continued respect for our profession. The real work that goes on in our buildings needs to be uplifted and respected. These teachers are doing an incredible amount of work to educate our youth. That work should be respected, as should their expertise. And I'm sorry, gentlemen, but one of the other things, and you guys will know better than this, is what does the political influence actually look like in a school? And are we trying to micromanage classrooms that really need to be spaces that are responding to the students in front of them? So there's a lot on our plate as educators, and we're here and happy to have the opportunity to talk about the things that are really concerning and weighing on the hearts and minds of our educators. So I'm going to ask our friends in the legislature to kind of address us first. So Mr. Napoli, you're up first.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you all for being here for this very important press conference. I'm honored to be here with my colleagues, and I want to take a minute and thank Kate and Jocelyn and the executive staff at CEA for really always being in the trenches with us. We have lots of long meetings and long public hearings, and they are always here, fighting and advocating for teachers, and we can't thank them enough, and we're lucky to have them by our side. And so I also want to take a minute and thank our legislative leaders, House Speaker Matt Ritter and Jason Rojas, for always encouraging us to make sure we go after policy that's better for teachers and paraprofessionals. But look, I mean, teacher burnout is real. And so I wanted to share a quick story with you. I have recently had a member of my family who taught for over 20 years have to leave the profession, a profession that she loved, a profession that she did for 20 years that she brought her heart and soul to. But the burnout was just too much. And this is happening all across our country, and certainly in our state, and we have to do more. Improving working conditions for teachers is something that my colleagues and I are really committed to. And I'll just talk about a couple of them quickly. First of all, I don't know of any other profession that has to work 37 and a half years to get a decent pension, right? And secondly, class sizes, are only getting bigger and bigger. And every data that I've ever seen or been exposed to has always showed that class size matters, and that smaller class sizes usually yield better results. We have achieved some progress, but there's certainly some more work to do. This is one of the most important professions, and so we have to make sure it's a high priority, and I look forward to working with you both.
Thank you, Ron. I'm going to ask Representative Poulos to step on up.
Thanks, Kate, Jocelyn. I'm honored to be here today. Privileged to be here today. Just as I was this morning when I got up and I drove to Reading to my school and taught my classes this morning and had the opportunity to talk with teachers and administrators and fill them in that I was coming to this press conference today. I talked to teachers about the survey and asked them what were the most pressing issues in that survey, and administrators as well, not about the survey, but what issues were on their mind. And I'll share a little bit of feedback with you about those conversations, and these are straight from schools. It's not just in my hometown or the district where I teach or in the state of Connecticut, but it's nationwide that we are facing a teacher shortage crisis in our country. And we need to work, everyone agrees, that we need to work to find ways to attract and retain people into our profession. And a good place to start is there's no silver bullet that's going to bring and populate our profession overnight. But a good place to start is with young people. So how can we bring young people into our profession? And the stories I hear are stories about growing your own in communities, finding a way to create a pipeline between high school and the classroom, identifying young people at an early age that are interested in education, and stay in contact with them as they go to higher education to learn how to be a teacher, maybe bring them back for their student teaching experiences, and then offer them opportunities to come back and work in their district. Because research will show that no one is better than someone who has grown up in a community to understand the culture of that community, the challenges that the students might face, and what helps them to be successful. And so that's a big piece of feedback. At the same time, people acknowledge that right now the cost of living is high. And kids are coming out of college after paying large tuitions. They're trying to get into some sort of an apartment or housing situation, and then they're getting into the teaching profession. And so one of the things that we can do to help along these young teachers is to alleviate some of the financial burdens that are involved with certification. Maybe it's the cost of licensure or the cost of some of the standardized tests that are involved in certifying a teacher. But that's one little thing we can do to make that transition, to make it a little bit easier for young people to get in our teaching profession. And once they're in, we got to retain young people. And we have to also retain our veteran teachers. And the one way we can do that is, as Representative Napoli mentioned, is to try to improve the quality of the workplace. Class sizes for sure are an issue. I personally have taught in class sizes of 15, 20, 25, sometimes even 30. And there's a difference. There's a difference with how much you can do in a smaller class than in a bigger class. How much you can cover, how much time you can spend one-on-one with students, when you assess how much feedback you could provide. All of those variables improve how well kids learn. So we need to take a look at class sizes. We also have to continue our indoor air quality initiatives that we've started. People shouldn't have to be in schools and be cold in the winter or hot in the fall and spring. People should be able to feel confident that they have a healthy environment at their schools. And so this is something that administrators and teachers are saying that they want to make sure that we have, that they think will improve the conditions. We have to take a look at special education. We have to make sure that, I mean, these special education costs are killing districts. They're drowning the municipal budgets. We have to make sure that the excess grants are properly funded for our schools. We can't say to a school, budget based on this formula and then take money away from them that they're expecting in the middle of a school year. How can we do that? I mean, so people will say there's not enough money to go around. Well, for one, we could implement with fidelity the mandate, the Education Mandate Relief Act that we passed into law last session. And we could take a look. We need to do an audit of all our education mandates. We got to look at the old ones, the ones that don't really have a good return on investment. And we got to get rid of them. We got to give that money back to schools so that schools can do a better job and have the funding to do it. And lastly, you know, there's a lot of talk about a disconnect between policymakers and educators. And the three of us up here happen to have that fine ability to translate, to navigate between policy and practice because we teach in schools. But what we need to do is make sure that we have educators at the table all along as we navigate this challenging time. As we make decisions on how to improve schools, we got to make sure we have educators weighing in. And I'm proud that last session that we reevaluated the charge of the Connecticut Advisory Council for Teachers Professional Standards. And we asked that committee now, we charged that committee with looking at any new initiatives that are coming down the pipeline in public education and giving guidance to the Commissioner of Education and to the legislature on what the impact of those initiatives might be on a school district, on a school, or on classroom practice. These are the types of steps we need to do to ensure that our policies are based on good practice. And lastly, last session, the governor appointed an active classroom practicing teacher to our State Board of Education. That high school teacher who teaches 5 classes a day sits along two students that provide a perspective of the consumer of public education, and she provides the perspective of the producer of education. This session, we need to commit to bringing an elementary school teacher to that State Board of Education. So there's 2 teachers and 2 students. This way, our policymakers will be informed of the implications of every single decision they make that impact teaching and learning. We need to make teachers feel proud again. Because when teachers feel proud, they do their jobs with fidelity, they do their jobs with passion, and it's this professionalism that helps improve the process of teaching and learning, helps kids succeed, and ultimately helps them live the lives they dream. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Representative Brown, I don't know what he left you to talk about, but.
We'll make this short and sweet. So thank you for being here today, and thank you to CEA for putting this on. Again, you know, my colleagues said it best, so I won't belabor the point, but what I will try to do is drive home the importance of what this is in front of us. I once had an administrator, a district level administrator that I worked for previously, who compared schools to emergency rooms. And the more I thought about it, he couldn't have been more correct, because the work that we are doing in our state's classrooms, in our nation's classrooms, is essentially triaging American society. We are preparing our future generations to be able to go out into the world and to compete and to just live respectable lives, participating in our political and civic culture, our economics, in the world and the communities around us. And if they are not being prepared because we do not have teachers to put in front of them, then that is on us. That burden and that responsibility is on us, and we have failed if we cannot do that. So clearly, as the numbers suggest from the survey, and we've got to do a better job to make sure that we are valuing this profession, that we are encouraging people to join this profession, because before too long, if we are not careful here, we will lose that. and then where are we? So the profession needs to be valued. Our students, the children of our communities need to be valued, and this is a way that we can show them that we care by guaranteeing that we put high-quality professionals in front of them who care enough about their well-being and their development to spend the time, money, and resources and their energy to make sure that they receive the highest quality education that's possible. So again, sound the alarm wide and far as we can, because this is America's triage. We are triaging our society. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'm gonna ask some of our teachers and our aspiring educators to kind of comment about the state that we're in, and then we'll share with you some of our ideas of where we can take all of this. So I'm gonna ask Elsa Batista from Newington.
Hi, good afternoon. I've taught middle school for 12 years, actually 15 years, and now I'm at the high school. Teaching is such a rewarding profession. We love what we do. But with that, people don't know. If you're not in the classroom, if you can't, spend the day in our shoes, please know that we wear many hats. Oftentimes, I teach more than just Spanish, and my colleagues teach more than just science and social studies and gym. We teach students how to be compassionate with one another. We teach social skills. We teach empathy. And, at the end of the day, when we go home to be caretakers for our parents or parents to our children or for our pets, sometimes we have to recharge and take a second, because teaching, it's a lot. It's a lot of emotional, rewarding, but it's very emotional. And we can't just go home and forget. We bring home tests to grades. We rubrics to give feedback on, and we really love our profession. But the message that we want to give across to everyone is it's exhausting, and many of us want to make it to the 37.5 years to get a decent pension. But many of my colleagues are looking at the years and saying, how many more years can I, with my health, be able to sustain, and with my mental health, right? It's physical, mental, emotional, and we love what we do. So that is a message that we want to send out there. And my colleagues are doing the best they can. Some districts have more support than others. And other districts, I don't know how they get up every day and still smile and give love to other students. But please keep that in mind. We love what we do, but we're getting tired.
That's a good point to put on.
I'm going to invite Joe Holloway, who comes to us from the East Hampton School District.
Good afternoon. Joe Holloway. I've been in the game teaching for over 25 years. We need to revitalize respect for this profession. Probably the greatest thing that we see through this survey is that teachers aren't valued. And this is where, while we exceed professional expectations, we're also on the front lines when we talk about mental health, whether that's nationally, whether it's locally. Our nation's health, there's a crisis going on, along with our first responders. We are responsible. We are right there at the forefront. And safety is our students and our communities. This is our main concern as teachers, as was mentioned. We're the number one. We're right there. Also, while this is ongoing, we need the resources. Those are failing, those are falling. We need those to continue. To couple with what was said earlier, our curriculum and professional development needs to be led by teachers in conjunction with our local boards of education. And we need to be on the right track in terms of policy and ensuring that teachers are number one in that regard, and dictating what is presented to our students and how that is brought into the classroom. This is necessary. So, as I'll leave some time for the rest, burnout is real. The burdens placed on our teachers are continuing, and it's up to us as stakeholders to give opportunities and give those resources to our schools so we can adequately help our students and the entire community in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
We're very fortunate to be joined by some aspiring educators. These are our students who, despite all the things that we're talking about, are still very excited to join us in the ranks of education. So I'm going to ask Asia Kerr from Mitchell College to come join us.
Hello, everybody. As a mother of an 8-year-old child, I made the choice to go back to school to do something that I really love. And that choice initially came with just a few hours of class or studying. In the last few years, though, especially with student teaching and going out into a school, it's now come with prep, the time that it takes to go out and find a way to provide those resources as a student. It's the hours of thinking about what I can do to adjust myself as a student when I'm going into a classroom trying to be the best teacher possible. I love being with the kids every day. It's probably the highlight of every single weekday that I have, is getting up and getting to go be in those schools with the kids. But student teaching is free labor. I'm going into that school and I have to put in the same amount of effort as every other teacher that's there. I have to think about what I'm teaching on the weekends and on the weeknights, and that is coming at a cost of my family when I'm abandoning them on weekends to go do things at libraries and researching books and reading things that take me away from my child. In addition to that, we have to go out as teachers, not just student teachers, but also as regular teachers, and work extra jobs. Teachers don't have the salaries that allow them to be able to take care of their families with the same security as other professions that put in the same amount of schooling and time that we do. In Connecticut, we have to go to graduate school, and that comes at an extra financial burden to teachers and students that doesn't match the salaries that we're walking into the career with. If the salaries aren't competitive, we're not going to be able to survive. I've seen many students who can't justify making the choice that I made to go to school and to be a teacher because they want to be able to be secure in their future. The only way to recruit quality educators who are passionate about what they're doing is to show them that this is a career worth choosing. Especially aspiring educators and early career teachers who can see that their colleagues and their peers in school are going into careers and making more money than them, and not having to put in the same amount of hours and work that they do outside of their job time. We need to know that we can use our extra time to take care of our families and also be the best educators possible. We need policymakers to realize and respect the fact that this profession needs better salaries so we can do the job that we love while making time for our families and to be people outside of the classroom. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to ask a good colleague from Bridgeport. You may have heard about Bridgeport. They've been in the news. But I'm going to invite Jeff Morrissey to address you as well.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Kate said, I'm Jeff Morrissey. I'm the president of the Bridgeport Education Association, also a proud Bridgeport teacher for 25 years. Right now in Bridgeport, we do have a significant shortage of teachers in critical areas like special education, math, science, and English for speakers of other languages. It is having an impact, a negative impact on the students and on my colleagues as well. It is of the utmost importance to have a certified teacher in every classroom. But that's nearly impossible when you consider, as it has been uttered here earlier, the expense, education, and effort that go into certification and the low salaries and high stress of this career. Teachers need to have their voices heard and should be in every room where decisions about education policy are being made. Far too often, key decisions, which one of the representatives here had mentioned, affecting our students are being made by people who have little or no experience as classroom teachers. We are the experts in our curriculum, in teaching and learning, and above all, identifying the needs of our students in our own classrooms. Yet every year, I see countless teachers, from those just starting out to those who are seasoned veterans, leaving our profession because policymakers are not listening to their concerns and their ideas. Decisions made do not appear to be centered on what our students need to learn and grow and fulfill their true potential. I'm here asking for the state to accelerate its commitment to supporting our schools. A statewide minimum starting salary for certified educators and adequate funding for salary increases would be a great first step. Teaching requires countless hours, well after the day is finished and the students go home. Teachers spend a substantial amount of time at home creating lessons, correcting their assessments, and thinking and brainstorming of ways to increase every student's success by adjusting instructional delivery to meet every student's needs. But despite all this, as it was mentioned, teachers often need to take on a second or third job just to make ends meet. To provide for my own family, personally, I myself have worked on golf courses, bartended, tutored, and waited tables on nights and weekends. I can recall many Friday afternoons at the end of the week after a long day of teaching, only to have 10 minutes to quickly change into my restaurant clothes, jump back in my car so I wouldn't be late for the dinner shift at whatever restaurant I was at the time. As U.S. Secretary Miguel Cardona had said, teachers should not have to drive Ubers as a second job. If we want the best and brightest educators, we must increase salaries. If we wish to end the teacher shortage and ensure every child has a certified teacher, then we need to make this profession more appealing to both college students and second career changers. This can be achieved by taking bold steps together to make the teaching profession one that is valued, elevated, and popular once again. Thank you.
We have another student with us, so we're going to invite Hannah Spinner from UConn to come and share you a few thoughts.
Thank you very much, Kate. As someone who's soon to enter the profession, the $60,000 minimum salary is something that's always at the forefront of my mind. Quite honestly, it makes me scared to think about. Already, I've spent hours poring over the contracts of various districts, trying to figure out my potential first year salary and determine my potential expenses that I'll have to plan for. Between trying to decide if I'm gonna have to take on a second job, like what was just said in the summers in order to make ends meet, or if I'm going to have to, live at home for a little bit in order to save up to buy a house. These are things that are really plaguing my mind, and they subsequently are scaring my passion for education away and are making me wonder whether the career that I've chosen is a sustainable one. We know better than anybody else that education is underpaid and undervalued. What most teachers make about 10 years into the career with a master's degree is what many of my non-education peers who I'm about to graduate with in May are going to make in their first job after only a bachelor's. Passion is truly what keeps education in business. Although we're forever grateful for the work that we feel for seeing our students succeed, this doesn't pay off our student loans, this doesn't pay our insurances, or our rent, or our car payments, or put food on the table for ourselves and our families. The financial strain that our current starting salary imposes on us while obtaining advanced degrees, taking expensive certification exams, all the while becoming financially independent for likely the first time in our lives, does not reflect our worth and serves only as a deterrent from this fulfilling career. It's no wonder to me that people my age are choosing alternative professions due to the compensation that they receive early on. While they'll likely be able to live comfortably in a home in the next 5 years, I'm stuck wondering if I'm going to be able to own a home by the time that I'm 30. It's time for the state and for the country, for that matter, to compensate teachers for our education and pedagogical expertise. In a time where the need for teachers is skyrocketing, this may be one crucial way to incentivize people to join this profession and meet the need for our state's education system. Beginning teachers like me can stop worrying so much about our survival and start focusing our attention where it's needed most, our students. Thank you.
So I'm going to ask my good friend and former mentee, because I did get this guy into the profession, so we've got to take good care of him. But I'm going to invite James Torini from Manchester.
Thank you. I'm James Torini. I teach math at Manchester High School, and I'd like to talk about student behavior, which is a complex issue facing teachers in the education of our students. The world has been changing, and our students of all ages are facing increased stress and can find regulating themselves at school difficult. As teachers, we always want what's best for our students. We want to support their learning, but their social and emotional needs have been growing. And we understand the support that our social workers, guidance counselors, and school psychologists that they do is vital as we continue to do what's best for our students. But supporting our school system to hire qualified service providers that we hope will have positive impacts on our students and their academics as well is difficult due to starting salaries. These highly qualified professionals too often will not join the educational workforce because they can just simply get paid more for doing something else. Now, student behavior is seen in schools at a variety of ages. Over my time as a high school teacher, the biggest obstacle that I face to teaching my students has been simply their cell phones. These devices, while offering benefits around communication and research, are too often misused by students. Students are often looking at social media, watching videos, and doing anything else but paying attention to math class. Based on our CEA survey, nearly all teachers, 94%, support restricting phones during instructional time, and 83% support banning them the entire school day. While I haven't given much good news yet, part of the solution to some of these students' behaviors is just banning cell phones. We've done it at Manchester High School this year through pouches and policies of not allowing them out during the school day. I've personally seen a great improvement in my students' attentiveness and their ability to simply interact with each other. The other day, my students finished a quiz. Now, normally, in the past, what they do is they would take out their phone, look at their notifications, text a friend, watch a video, do anything else. This is going to sound strange, but in a school, they just took out a book and started reading. I mention this because, like I said, in the past this was different. Shutting a book is a lot easier than turning off your phone. We're able to transition into our next activity in no time. Well, it seems like reading a book is simple. It's a huge victory for our school, our community, and for our teaching staff. And as we think about student behavior, a simple change that we can make in supporting our teachers and our students is just to continue to not allow these cell phones in our places of school so we're able to hold our students to a high standard. Thank you.
What we're laying out for you, I think, potentially can be a roadmap for doing what we need to with our schools. I want to put a couple of ideas out into this before I invite my partner here to kind of speak as well. We know that things can change quickly and rapidly in education with the right influences. Investing in community school models that allow us to really do wraparound services wholly and completely for our students. Expanding apprenticeship programs that allow us to provide paid student teaching would be critical. We need to look at our actual expenditures. ECS, the foundation dollars are in 2013. Imagine if all of you were getting paid today what you were getting paid in 2013. That is our current investment foundation level for our ECS formula. We only pay about 72% of our special education dollars, asking our towns to absorb 28%. That was $74 million last year. We need to do better. Connecticut has the resources and can do better. And I'm going to ask my good friend Jocelyn Delancey, who has lots of ideas, to also share her thoughts. She is the vice president who leads this a great organization with me.
Thank you, Kate. I want to say that I think it's very clear that this union and my colleagues behind me really want one thing, and that's a successful and thriving public school system where all of our students can learn well, happily, I would even argue joyfully, and with competent, caring, really smart and sophisticated educators at all levels supporting them and doing the work. And in order to do that, we have to make an investment in public education. It is the single most important investment that any town can make. And we've done some good work. We've made some really positive changes. We've talked about, I'm gonna point at the P squared, the policy and pouches with cell phones. We've had a lot of school districts who've listened to our need and made it successful. We have play back into our elementary schools, which will be such a markedly different experience for our learners in our younger grades with their access to early literacy and math skills just through adding play and making that a priority. We've looked at our teacher evaluation system. We've made changes. We've made reforms to DCF so that reporting is safer and better for everybody. And we've made a lot of changes. The one thing that those changes haven't been is financial. And I think that that is the critical understanding that we need to invest in our public schools. We've talked about class size. We've talked about salary. We've talked about funding special education. We should be focusing on our paraeducators too as well. We need those strong and supported in our schools. So what we need to be doing is making sure that this session, when we start talking about policy and legislation, that a priority of funding our public schools and directing those funds in the places that will impact our students so that they can be successful is where we put our money, that's where we put our policy, and that's where we put our care. It is critically important. Our students need us, and they need smart and sophisticated, caring, compassionate teachers. And if we don't start putting that money into our public schools, we will not have those teachers. We've already seen the consequences to it. 119,000 disconnected youth in our state. That's too many. One is too many, but 119,000, that's the consequence of us avoiding spending dollars in education and not listening to the people who've been saying it for year after year after year. I'm missing something, aren't I? No? Okay. All right, what I will say is this. This is a community effort, and I've said it a million times, I'll say it again. The conditions that we provide for our educators are the conditions that we provide for our learners. And our learners deserve the best, so we need to do that. Thank you.
So I'll just close before I ask if you have any questions with a couple of things. First, this data that we share with you is not our destiny, it is today. So data is not destiny. It is information that helps us to drive to the future we want. It is true, it is real, it is honest. It should not be ignored, but it's not the end of the story, but a step along the journey. So we have a choice. This is our moment, and our moment is whether or not we're going to move forward and do something powerful, or if we're going to continue to just ho-hum and ignore the call. So I invite you to review our survey. I invite you to listen to the educators here, and I invite you to go talk to an educator in your community. Thank you. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. So I think lack of respect manifests itself in different ways. One would be in like micromanaging, the fact that, you know, if you're asking for teachers to submit scripted lessons day in and day out, that does not respect our autonomy and our understanding and our professionalism. So I think that is one thing. When we overly manage a classroom that is a really very dynamic space with students. I also think when we start to second guess our educators and we put them into conversations where we don't trust what they're doing. And I think we've seen this happen occasionally where somebody comes into a building, makes a statement about something they heard or whatnot, and it may not even be real, but there's an elevation of those statements before there's any conversation. One of the things that has really kind of infiltrated our world is social media. So a student comes home, says something, and all of a sudden there's a blast on social media. 25 years ago, a student comes home and said something, and you'd call the teacher and say, hey, my student said this to me. And instead, there's sort of this trial by social media before there's any conversation. These are the things that are creeping into our capacity to feel respected. We just want to be treated like everybody else would want to be treated. If there's something going on and you have a question, ask us. But instead, we have this enormous trial by social media that's going on, particularly in education, that really almost every incident turns around and something wasn't understood. And if a conversation had been had, we could have resolved it long before, 350 people decided to comment on a post. And so some of those things are really kind of hitting us over and over. I also think too often we aren't included in the student disciplinary process, where we're not asked what was going on, how can we help? Instead, we're kind of just thrust into places where we're told, just deal with it. I don't know if anybody else has something they wanted to share in particular on that.
You want to go for it?
So currently as a student teacher, I walked into an environment where, like Kate was mentioning, the curriculum is very structured. And so I'm coming in thinking that I can create lesson plans and do all of these things, and only finding out that I have to follow a script. And it takes out the ability for me to use the education that I've paid for, the education that I've put all my effort into for the last few years, and use that education to make good choices for the students. When you become a teacher, you expect to be trusted with people's children, trusted with people's future education and everything like that. And unfortunately, when you're walking into that environment being told, this is what you must do, this is how you must do it, you don't get the chance to use the education you so rightfully paid for.
For the legislators, obviously there was a lot of talk about the upcoming session. All of these ideas that were mentioned, whether it boils down to financial or some of the other suggestions, are these ideas that are already being worked on, already being drafted, or just conversations you're having with colleagues? What's sort of the status of what we might see from these policies?
Which one of you would like to?
Thank you for the question, and it's a good one. And so we in the legislature work very closely, as mentioned earlier, with CEA and AFT. We also have a lot of legislators now serving in the building behind me. I think there might be 7 or 8 of us.
I think it's 7.
7. And so every year it is expanding, and so that's a good thing. But to your point, we do constantly collaborate on many of these concepts that were heard today, that were in the survey, and we'll certainly, as the session goes forward, figure out a way to get them through the committee process.
Building off her question, a lot of these proposals aren't brand new. I mean, last year there was a bill proposing that $60,000 minimum salary. What are you guys going to do differently to make sure that these are successful this year and the upcoming future?
Go for it. I have a few thoughts if you want.
Please. No, and so we have seen some districts, and CEA actually has been advocating about this for quite some time now, where starting teaching salaries, need to be higher, right? And that's a good first step in the right direction. The town that I represent, Waterbury, has done a very good job with that. We've seen the early ranges in the pay scale a lot higher than they historically have been. And so we're really happy about that. And so we think that will continue as far as progress is concerned. But certainly, we wish it would move a lot faster than it does, but we're going to keep fighting to go forward.
In terms of addressing the teacher shortage, are there any plans or current actions to recruit more teachers of color to the profession?
Absolutely. I think that's been a target initiative that certainly we as an organization have committed to. There is a mentorship program, or rather a scholarship program that offers minority students or students of color from alliance districts $10,000 per year to come into the profession. I would argue that we need to take any boundaries of location off of that scholarship program. Right now it is underutilized because it's carved out to only go towards students in these alliance districts. I would argue that if a student of color wants to come into our profession, I don't know that I care where they graduated from high school. And so opening up that scholarship program would be tremendously, I think, a real tremendous opportunity for us as a state to draw people in. Because as we've heard, the financial barriers are extraordinary to coming into the profession. I also do want to do a little plug for the work that we're doing on certification. So the new Teacher Certification Council that the legislature passed into law last year has started meeting and looking at that from the lens of, do we have any unnecessary barriers? Ways that we are prohibiting people from accessing this profession for unnecessary reasons. And so I think the whole-scale landscape is, one, to try and address the financial burden, and two, to make sure that we're doing everything we can to remove barriers in that process.
When you talk about student behavior and discipline, is that just cell phones or is it more than that?
I think it's definitely more than that. Unfortunately, we found that students came back from the pandemic, and actually, I would argue probably prior to the pandemic, we were seeing an uptick in real dysregulation of our student behaviors. And there's multiple reasons for that. Some of them can be, instability outside of school. Some of it can be challenges with learning. We know that, as Jocelyn mentioned, play-based learning was important to us to bring back, because we know that if you ask a 5-year-old to sit for 6 hours, they're going to become dysregulated, and they're going to act out. And so inviting play back into our educational process was really critical for making school fun. I would also argue that the micromanaging and the scripting that Asia spoke about is also barriers to our students' learning. When we take away the ability for the teacher to really interact and respond to the children in front of them, we elevate behaviors. And we do start to see, children kind of lashing out. And we have seen and heard of extraordinary circumstances where children do, kind of really lose control and will destroy a classroom. And those things are not only disruptive to the student experiencing it, who is really struggling in that moment, but often impacts the students around them just as much, and really creates a sense of kind of upheaval in a learning environment. And none of that's healthy. So I think there's things that we need to do in our system to say, listen, how do we provide room for teachers to respond to our students better, and have the opportunity to build the learning spaces we know will support our students better. But there's also the need to have, I think, trauma-informed professional development, making sure our teachers know how to manage the wide variety of things our students are experiencing. The number of our students who've dealt with violent crime is extraordinary. Just extraordinary. And as educators, unless we're taught, we're kind of winging it on how to manage that. So we need those trauma-informed practices to really support our kids in the best way. And then I honestly think the investment in support services, our social workers, our school psychologists, our counselors, to make sure that we're really providing the level of support some of our students really need. Well, I want to just say thank you. In terms of legislative priorities, we will absolutely be handing off, I promise you. We've been writing legislation, but we will absolutely look forward to working through all of these issues, working with our legislative partners, the legislative leaders, to ensure that we are back here next year talking about all the great changes and the great investment Connecticut has made in the state. Thank you very much. And have a good holiday. Warm up.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Ready.